Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of Out of Character, a show where your favorite creators drop out of character for an hour to talk with game designer and host Marc Tassin, that'd be me, about their art, their process, and all the nerdy stuff that inspires them. From the secrets behind their craft to the ins and outs of the business to the games and shows and books that they can't get enough of. It's a unique and candid look at the folks who create the stuff that you and I love. So comments are going to be open throughout the show. And although we can't make promises, we'll probably pull in at least some of your comments and questions as we go along. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce tonight's guest, Celeste Conowitch. Hi, Celeste.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thrilled to be here.
So, we usually start out for folks who maybe don't immediately recognize your name from their books and things that they have. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so again, my name is Celeste Conowitch. I am a full-time game designer in the TTRPG space. Specifically, I've been doing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons design for the last 5 years or so. I just recently stepped into the senior game design role at Cobalt Press, but you might recognize my work from, I was one of the authors on Ram of the Frost Maiden from Wizards of the Coast. I'm also the GM and producer of Venture Maidens, which is an actual play 5th edition D&D podcast that's been around for 5-6 years almost. And it just recently, actually, our Venture Maidens campaign guide for that setting based on the podcast is just about to drop. So we had that Kickstarter running last year. And see, what else do I do? Yeah, podcasting, gaming, the works. I think those are the big bullet points.
So I think, one of the first things that strikes me, we're going to talk about the gaming stuff, obviously. But one of the things that strikes me is that you've been doing actual play for 5 years, which means
Yes.
you were cool before it was cool
We
to do
we
actual play,
were
right?
yes, as the starting point, I like to say our show started about a week after the Adventure Zone first came out. So for those of you in the know for D&D podcasts, we were right there at
Uh-huh.
the beginning. So it was us sitting there in our, sad little $20 headsets trying to figure out how streaming worked before everybody had a great microphone in their house.
Right.
Yeah, that was us.
Oh, that is super cool. And I mean, how did you guys decide to do that? Is it something that you saw someone else doing, or was it just you thought it would be really cool to share that with people?
Yeah, so I have the great privilege of having friends that I've been able to play D&D with throughout my life. So before I started the podcast, 3 of the podcast members there are people I had actually already been playing and GMing games for 10
Hmm.
years. At
Hmm.
that point, we had been meeting, every Sunday and playing. So at that point in time, we had actually just wrapped up the homebrew campaign that we were all playing in person, and all of these people were at a point where we were starting to move away, get promotions, and drift apart. And it was around that time that I discovered that there were some D&D actual play things happening. And I was like,
Hmm.
wow, this is so cool. But you know what I wish, if there were voices like mine that I could hear on these
Yeah.
shows. And you know what? I've been DMing for a really long time and I have a great group of friends. Like, let's do it. Let's figure out how to do that. So it was a way to keep our game group going in a
Yeah.
sense, and then also to contribute a different perspective to the growing space.
That's really cool. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things a lot of folks don't seem to recognize is that when you see these groups that have been gaming together for years and years and
Yeah.
years, like, our group has been gaming together for, I think, going on almost 30 years now,
Yeah.
25, 30 years.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's work. It's
Yes.
everyone sort of like you really like making the time to make it happen.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
however that,
it's like any relationship, right? You have to put in the work and you have to things just don't keep going on forever. You have to maintain it. You have to cultivate these gaming groups and spaces. So it's a,
right.
it's a challenge for sure.
Well, it is, especially as life starts to come along and
Right.
kids and families and all sorts of
Exactly.
things start coming in that eat up that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so one thing that I think is interesting though, and is kind of cool, and my group has kind of done this, and it sounds like this is what happened with Venture Maidens, is you went from this is how we play, this is where
Mhm.
we play, to and now we're giving it to you so you can play
Yeah.
there too, so you can get into our world. I mean, how did that sort of transition come about from being your world to a shared world that you're sending out for everyone else to play in?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think right at the beginning when we started this, we had big dreams for it. We wanted to create a show that in a space that people would feel comfortable also engaging with.
Yeah.
Maybe they would see us playing D&D and want to play themselves. And so it really did grow very quickly into a very positive community. We pretty quickly started a Discord server, and we started to see a lot of the same folks stopping by, week after week to watch the streams and then engage with the content. And that grew into a Patreon. So more and more people were coming into the space, and their love for what we're doing just absolutely fed back into the process. So it became very much a community effort, creating and believing in this world at large.
Hmm.
And when we did have the opportunity, of course, to so we worked with 2C Gaming to produce this book, and that opportunity came. We were like, yes, we absolutely have to seize this. Folks in our community had been asking so many questions and wanted to know, hey, how can I make a character like this? Or what is that NPC? Where is that in the monster book? And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I made it up. And so we had a great running list of tools that people wanted to see and ways people wanted to engage in the world. So we took and accumulated all of that for years and years of engagement. And when it came time to write the book, we used that to inform what this campaign guide should be.
Oh, that's really great. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of almost had a roadmap laid out from that previous engagement
Right?
as you
Yeah.
were making your way through it. And I want to show really quick. Let me pull
Oh,
up.
yeah. The
I want to
cover.
pull up a picture of the cover. Yeah, 'cause it's a
Yeah,
great
yeah, our
cover. It's a
cover was
really
done
great
by
cover.
yeah, Key Weatherton, who is just a
Yeah.
fantastic artist, there, but yeah, so that's the Ventureman's campaign guide cover, and so we have the 3 goddesses of fate,
Hmm.
uh, so the Sisters of Sorrow, they are called in our world, and of course, weaving, combing, and, snipping the threads of fate, as they deem fit. So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
again, Key Weatherton, fantastic artist. We were so lucky to get her for this cover, but oh boy,
Yeah.
I cannot wait to get this in people's hands.
Well, and when is that going to be coming out? When is
Yes, yeah. So the PDF copy, the
Mhm.
community copy is releasing in just a couple of weeks here, actually. So
Okay.
that's and this is another great step that we wanted to build into the process. We wanted to put together the not quite final version of the PDF and release it to our community so
Mhm.
fans could look at it, scan it, see if they had any questions or concerns about content or things that needed to be clarified. And then we're going to take all of that feedback and do another revision pass and edit and bring it up to those standards, then release that final PDF in about 30 days after the point to really, really make it feel like a book that is owned by the
Well,
whole
and
community.
gosh, I mean, with the way that you approach this whole thing, I mean, it sounds to me like this is exactly the right path because you talked about how your community helped you to build this, helped to inspire you and talk about the ideas and sort of build
Yeah.
that roadmap for you. It makes perfect sense to like pull them into this as you're going along and keep them part of that, right?
Yeah, and
To
we
guide you
we
through it.
always we always like to refer to our listeners and our folks as, they're adventurers. They're people in our party,
Yeah.
right? So we wouldn't feel right just saying, "Nope, this is final gone," without getting, that feedback from really the foundational team that helped make this book possible. I mean, they literally funded it on Kickstarter, right? This book would not exist
Right. Yeah.
without their passion and belief in the project.
So, I mean, you're doing this, and like most people who publish their own book, you actually have a day job as well.
Yes.
In your case, your day job happens to be much like your night job.
Yeah,
But how
game
do you,
design.
I mean, it's tough to do this. A lot of folks struggle to do this. I know I've had to do it with the work that we've been doing and trying to find like how do you squeeze it in? What early mornings, late nights? I mean, has that been sort of your experience? How have you found the time to do this? 'Cause I know a lot of people want to do this.
Yes, yes. I have been it's been a combination of ferocity and luck, very much in my case.
Hmm.
So I started freelancing about that 5 years ago. I started
Okay.
full-time freelancing about 3 years ago or so.
Hmm.
At that point, I was, Venture Maidens was growing, and I was starting to get a lot more of these freelance jobs, and they gave me so much joy, and my day job absolutely did not. At that point, I was doing like corporate event sales. And so I saved up money for 6 months and said, okay, I've got 6 months to try and make the full-time thing work. And because I cannot do this anymore, I cannot keep the 40 hours and this and that. So I
Yeah.
walked away from that full-time job and then started game designing full-time at that point. And luckily, things took off from there. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I got the full-time job at 2C Gaming,
Hmm.
who we had already, as venture maidens, commissioned them to produce the book, so run the
Oh,
Kickstarter and
okay.
handle printing and production. And they really enjoyed working with me on that. I enjoyed working with them, so I actually moved into a full-time capacity with them. So some of my full-time hours were spent writing the Venture Maidens campaign guide. So it all
Oh,
worked out
nice.
really well. But on top of that, all the other, of course, freelancing and Venture Maidens, it's a full-time job. It has
Yeah.
been a very uh telling, and I think it's been a process to learn exactly how to manage my time and what works for me and what strategies. And I don't think I'm perfect at it by any means.
Right.
There are certainly things some days where you're like, man, I have 800 things I need to get done tomorrow according to my calendar, and none of them are going to happen. I think it's just learning more about your own capabilities and really seizing the opportunities that make sense for you and being okay with letting things go or
Yeah.
being okay with delegating is huge. So
Hmm.
more and more as I go on, I keep telling people if they want to get into this hobby, don't go alone. Find someone else who also wants to get into the hobby. Do things as a team. Don't do things by yourself in this
Hmm.
space. There's a reason at these big companies you have someone doing layout, somebody handling printing, somebody handling design. And on top of that, you usually have more than one person doing these things.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And
So yeah, find teammates.
well, and I think one thing that's interesting is you're talking about how people look at a book like Venture Maidens and it's gorgeous and it's professional, right? And they look at
Yeah.
these things that people are putting out and they think, "Oh my God, they must just be have it all together and I'm a failure because I make mistakes and I miss deadlines and things go
Yeah.
wrong." But I think what people don't realize is that getting to that beautiful, gorgeous professional book, there's all sorts of errors and
Mhm.
mistakes and bad choices and
Yes.
poor time management where you wake up the next day and go, "Oh, I gotta get it together today," right?
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that that happens to everyone. It's not like
It absolutely happens to everyone. The first 3 or 4, 5, 10 things I designed were absolute they were bad. They were bad, and I needed to write them and do my best and have it be a failure so somebody could tell me, "Oh, hey, this was a failure. This is why."
Yeah.
Because you have to mess up to learn and to be able to do better. So I think a lot of folks do get discouraged when they dip a toe into this space or creating
Mhm.
anything in any creative space. And if it's not an automatic success, people are heartbroken, especially
Yeah.
because we live in a world where people create these images of themselves right on social media like look how successful and amazing I am, and without realizing that is highly curated and
Mhm.
cultivated. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into these people making themselves look like they have it all together. Nobody has it all together. We're all just taking it one day at a time, one assignment, one to-do list at a time.
Right, exactly, and then hopefully you get it done, and if somehow things go horribly wrong, you just try the next morning, right?
You
And I
yes.
think
Yeah.
just the thing is that you keep trying, right?
Right.
Is that if you really love it
Yes.
and you really wanna do it, you just keep doing it, and there's no guarantee that I mean, this industry isn't about getting rich, it's not about
No.
right? I mean, add
No.
up, like, all the money that the entire industry
Yeah.
makes, it's not really even enough for a venture capitalist to invest in,
Right.
outside of, like, a WOTC, right?
Yes, of course.
And
The
it
one titan, and then we're all just
right, and all the rest, like, you couldn't even get an investor, so the reality is that, it's just doing it because you love it and not giving up on it, so that's very cool, and yeah, Venture Maiden just looks gorgeous, I'm just super excited to see that book, and
yes.
I bet you
Yeah.
guys are just, like, thrilled to see it coming about.
Oh,
Y
yes, and what's also been super weirdly and cool and helpful is because as I've been designing the book, and we've been running the show, I've actually gotten to play test a lot of the content through the show. So, like,
Uh-huh.
we've been playing with the new systems, like this new heroic destiny system we built in the book. We've been getting to play that on stream and getting feedback from folks. We've been able to use the new character classes and stuff. So, it's all a secret hybrid of make it all work by combining your passions in whatever way you can.
So heroic destiny, tell me what that is. I really want to, as a
Yeah.
gamer, I'm like, I want to know what that is.
So one of the things I really wanted to do, because Venture Maidens is so character driven, and that's the kind
Hmm.
of D&D I really enjoy, when people really get to delve into what makes their character tick and their own goals and ambitions. I wanted to design a mechanical system to allow GMs and players to work together to build those kind of stories, to give them actual mechanical tools to build those stories. So
Hmm.
the heroic destiny system, you can think of them kind of like B plots that
Hmm.
happen. So if a party wants to use heroic destinies, each character selects one of the destinies presented in the book, and each destiny has 4 tiers that are like personal achievement based goals to achieve
Hmm.
these things. And so by the end of this journey, or using the system gives you abilities to like tap into these like side missions or these side stories, right, to increase like the player's personal journey as
Hmm.
you are engaging with the larger campaign. So there are things like the Avenger heroic destiny, for instance, right? If your character chooses this, we have some suggestions like what would set you on the path of this destiny. What is it that happened to you that makes you seek vengeance? And then, of course, culminating at the end of tier 4, like when you end this destiny, how
Hmm.
do you end it? Do you get that vengeance you sought? Do you forgive the enemy that destroyed this? And as you go along, you get those mechanical benefits, but they're only unlocked by hitting these story plot points. So it's a really nice way for GMs and players to work together to build those kind of stories, because I think we all want that in our
Yeah.
games, but it's hard to incorporate, right, if you don't have the tools given to you, especially mechanically.
So I guess one of the challenges that comes up in a when you have like the idea of a destiny or something that
Right.
is bound to happen, bound by fate, is that many games, maybe all of them,
Yeah.
go make a hard left at the plot, right?
Right.
And you just are like struggling to like, how do you bring it in without it feeling artificial? Like, what do you guys do? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so we have a few different suggestions written in. But so one, obviously, if you want to go hard, GMs, you can try and weave it into the overall story and
Hmm.
work together at the beginning during your session 0, work with the characters, be like, okay, here's the kind of campaign we're going to play. Here are some options that would work. So one, that's probably the most difficult.
Yeah.
Two, I like to do these as side quests. So every once in a while, maybe if you play, 4 times a month, right? One of
Hmm.
those sessions should be devoted to a spotlight for one character, right? As you achieve that heroic destiny. So it's like those one-shot games or those kind of mix 'em up games
Yeah.
that happen, or those special episodes, right, during a TV show. It's like the beach episode, where everybody you step a
Right.
little bit away from like in time, in plot, and get to have those moments. So that's one option. Or 3, doing them as flashbacks or things that happen during like downtime. So this is
Hmm.
something you don't actually have to play this during the game. You can choose to go back in time and describe and work with each other to build the scene of what happened. Like what happened that one week that character was gone because, the player
Right.
couldn't make it, but maybe they were doing something to advance their destiny. So there are a few different ways to do this, and what's really cool is I've been taking a lot of inspiration from other tabletop role playing games that have these kind of mechanics. So a lot of like Powered by the Apocalypse stuff that's very narrative based, or Burn Bright was actually a huge inspiration for this, which is a science fantasy game that on Roll20 made by James and Tricasso, and they have a great kind of leveling system based like this. So it was cool to look at a lot of other games and just see the best strategies
That's
for
very
bringing
cool.
something like that into D&D. Yeah.
Well, I like the second one a lot because it's sort of
Yeah.
like if you're watching a TV show, it's that one where
Right.
we follow Giles as he goes off
Yeah,
on
it's
some
like
side
this
mission,
is
right?
yeah, this is a Xander episode. That kind of feeling, because you totally see these happening, or Star Trek, like this episode is about Data. There
Right.
are those episodes that come up, and they are a great way, especially if you're in the middle of something so heavy, like maybe you're getting towards end game, right? And you're just like, oh my god, it's like brutal twist, turn.
Right. Right.
Stepping away and focusing on like a personal goal of a character can be so refreshing in the middle of these big, overwhelming story plots.
Well, and it's kind of a cool way to build in a system
Yeah.
where the other people at the table support this other
Mhm.
person. Because one of the things that can happen at a game table is sort of a competitiveness
Yeah.
can come in, almost because each person is wants to push their story forward. But if they know they're going to get their turn to
Right.
have that special story,
Exactly.
it makes you a little bit less panicked that that story will never happen, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's so cool if you know ahead of time also, because a lot about this system is about communication. I
Yeah.
feel like there's definitely a built-in impetus for GMs to not tell the players what's going on or not talk to them about the plot, like, "I must
Right.
delight and surprise you by myself every time." And again, going back to the don't do it alone, this is all about GMs and players working together and saying, like, "Hey, if you're gonna pick this destiny, you have to pick it with your GM, and the GM has to pick it with the players. And you all at every point should talk about how you want to achieve the next step in your goal. What kind of thing do you want to focus on for this? So it really does, yeah, have that conversation back and forth and make sure that everybody is involved in taking those turns and building things together. It really does make people feel more secure and also be bigger fans, I think, of each other at the table. Like, if
Yeah,
they know
exactly.
they're in this character's episode, they're gonna be like, "Hell yeah!" Like, "Let's do it."
That's very cool. All right, yeah, we're gonna be doing that if my guys are watching tonight.
Yay!
You know that
Good.
we're gonna do some of that because that's very, very cool. I love that.
Yeah. We've got some great options in there. I'm really excited, for folks to check those out.
Oh, that's very cool. So, I wanna ask you a question about your current gig, your
Yes.
new job.
Yes.
What is a senior game designer? What is
Yeah.
that? I don't think most
Yes.
people know.
Yeah, for sure. So senior game designer. So I just recently, as of I think 2.5 weeks, today was my official start with Cobalt
Yeah.
Press. As so, a senior game designer, as opposed to just a normal game designer, is somebody who is more focused on big picture stuff and
Mhm.
organizing projects on a larger scale, and then usually hiring and working with other game designers underneath who are more responsible for like purely producing content.
Got it.
So part of my job, for example, is putting together pitches for like new products that might be coming out, or taking ideas that folks
Mhm.
have and actually building outlines and assignments and deciding what are we gonna focus on, where we're gonna like allocate words. And so I get to work with a lot of freelancers in the space.
Mhm.
So get to recommend folks, bring them on board. I look at freelancer drafts, and then I usually make revisions based on what the project might need. So really like top level kind of
Yeah.
thinking and making creative decisions about next projects and those sort of things, thinking holistically for the company as opposed to on a per project basis.
And I imagine that a big part of your role would be looking at what's the approach? Like, how do
Yes.
you present material? What
Yeah.
is important? How do you
Right.
focus?
Yeah, I do spend a lot of my time looking at what is coming out right now in the
Yeah.
TTRPG space and looking at the products that people are really enjoying. Like, what are
Mhm.
they engaging with? Why are certain things doing well? What systems do we need to put in place to make our content more accessible? Just really looking at those big picture things and seeing what we can do as a company to follow those trends or to make the changes that need to be made in the game.
So, are you focused entirely on just the books? Do you work with the Patreon? Is it across the whole spectrum
I'm
of
across the
product?
whole board. So Cobalt Press has a lot going on, which is one of the
Yeah.
reasons they definitely needed to bring in a senior game designer. So I touch everything from like the blog content that goes out to the stuff that comes out on Patreon, everything that runs on Kickstarter, so the full books, and then of course any like reprinting efforts we do, updating errata, handling like playtest stuff. Uh, a lot of different places I'm going and making sure that everything is basically turning out in a way that we really want it to be.
Yeah, and probably you also wanna make sure that it's sort of like a unified, so it's all with one
Yeah,
voice, so to speak.
right.
And I don't just mean the writing, but the presentation as a whole,
Oh, yeah.
people have to feel like they understand what they're getting and it's
Yeah,
what they
and
expect.
Yeah, and also my job as a liaison to the freelancers too is to make sure they feel like they are empowered to write things for Cobalt Press that feels right and feels in the space. So making sure they have the tools they need from templates to like, hey, we asked you to write this. It is similar to these three things, so make sure you look at these because we publish those, and
Yeah.
that kind of empowering folks to write in the voice of Cobalt Press and to create great work.
So that's one of the things that's always tough, and this is tough in any sort of like a management type of role, is where you have to find a way to empower people to do their own thing, to be creative, to come up with something that maybe you didn't expect, and yet keep them on the right path. I mean, what for you? What are your tricks? Like, how do you do that? How do you keep
Yeah.
people where they need to be while still giving them
It's
that freedom?
very similar to being a game master, in
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
ways, right? Uh, so making sure people always know where the rails are and not making them feel like they're too on them. I feel that, I mean, strong communication is the key to everything. So being available to answer questions, making sure that you provide everything up front so they're never
hmm
scrambling. They have the whole toolkit in front of them. And this is even things like don't make assumptions that people know how to use word templates, for example, right?
right,
If you're going
yeah,
to send a word template, which is something that if any of you have freelance or are going to, if you ever get a template, absolutely use it, please. But don't make assumptions, right? That just sending the template will be enough. Link to an article about how to use them, or link to a video about how to use them, or whatever it is. It's just make sure it's all there, make sure the information is upfront, clear, and always be available for questions and to help when needed is most of the work, because if you're there and you're like, hey, I'm here to support you, people usually thrive at that point.
well, and I'm because I've done some of this, I know that this happens, but I'm sure you see it too, where you get something and you're like going, okay, it's just like on a game night as a GM where someone does something, you're like going, I never would have
You're
thought of
like,
that. And they are
what?
so right. That is the right
Yeah,
way. That's what
yeah,
we should do. You probably
yeah.
see that in some of the freelance stuff that you get as
Oh
well.
yeah, I it's such a joy working with other freelancers. And again, why you should always work in a team, because if you have 10 people in a room and you're all throwing out ideas, that's like 10 times a better chance of getting a brilliant idea that you never would have thought of, right? So
Right.
seeing these brilliant things, or even getting questions from like a question you didn't expect and you're like, "Oh, I thought I explained that well." And, "Oh, no, I did not do that in a way that was helpful." Absolutely having that communication, that constant feedback, and seeing how folks are working as well, and also what they think is important is really, really telling and helpful. And that's why I really like to work with as many freelancers as I can, because as I'm going along and more of these projects are coming up, people's strengths start to show themselves in different ways. So I know that for next time, like this freelancer was amazing at magic items.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm going to save working with them for this book that I know is coming up. Or this person just excelled, they turned this in early. Like this was great. I know I can count on them if I have something with a short deadline. That sort of learning and learning about different creative processes is huge.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, I will say that, I have my own company and I actually want to be kobold when we grow up. That's you guys and Monty Cook are like, if I can be them, that'll
Yeah.
be perfect. We'll hit it.
Yeah.
So I have to be careful because I really just want to like push you for like, and then how would you do this? And what would you do for this? All right. So speaking of cool projects, I want to show off this gorgeous
Yay!
cover.
Oh
This
my
is
gosh.
something you've got
Yes.
coming out that you worked on extensively.
Yeah, yeah. So this the Book of Ebb and Tides right here. So this is one of the Kickstarter projects that Cobalt Press ran, I think 4 or 5 months ago. But
hmm
it is coming out very shortly. I heard tell that the books have gotten off of the boat and things are happening. So this project in I'm sure had a lot to do with why I am where I am now, because I had the privilege
Yeah.
of working directly. It was Wolfgang Bauer and I who wrote this book together. So we co-wrote the
Mhm.
Book of Emp and Tides. And what's really great about it is it's a very like dark fairy themed book, so a lot
Hmm.
of shadowy fey stuff going on here. And I have been able to work on a lot of Cobalt Press stuff as a freelancer, and through it all, whenever I got an opportunity to work on anything Fae, I was like, Wolfgang, put me in there. I love it. I love the Fae because the world of Venture Maidens is very swept up in the Fae, and I was doing a lot of work in that vein for the Venture Maidens campaign guide. So I was thrilled when he reached out to me to ask me to write this book with him, and that process was just so lovely and just such a joy to work on. I feel like that was really informative for how we could work together in the future in a full-time capacity. So really excited for the Book of Ebb and Tides. It is gorgeous. I finally saw
Uh-huh.
like a PDF copy of it, and I just I cannot wait.
It's so
Uh
cool when you see it all come together, right?
oh
When
my
finally
gosh.
all those
Yes.
different pieces,
Mhm.
and now, of course,
There
you're
oh man.
go
Oh,
ahead.
go I was saying there's nothing more exciting than writing something and, sending it off, whatever, and it's a few weeks and editing and whatever, and then you see it and it comes back and you see the art piece, right? That brings
Right.
to life whatever it was, the monster or, the subclass, and you see it right there on the page. It's the coolest feeling in the world.
Absolutely. So with this book, I mean, this is one part setting book to a
Mhm.
certain extent, but it's not just that. There's more to it
Right.
than that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
there's lots of player options in there, there's monsters, it talks a lot about fairy magic and shadow magic, and the
mhm.
way the mysterious shadow roads work that are these ways to transport people all over this setting. So, it's a lot of it's a cool bag of just tools for both GMs and players to really use in their games.
I mean, it feels like there's a certain amount of play style written into it as well, where it's like sort of
Mhm.
taking you and saying like not just here's where
Yeah,
you can
like
play, but here's how
be
you can make it
careful,
feel
yeah.
right.
Don't pick fights, like, you know, unless you have to, because it is a very scary, dangerous place,
Right.
and, just running headlong at challenges is never going to work. So it definitely encourages thoughtfulness and investigation and social role playing, as well as the elements of combat.
Right. Oh, it's very cool. Well, congratulations on that one coming out
Thank
soon.
you.
So
I know I'm just it's gonna be a very exciting next couple of months, for releases.
yeah, I'm sure that the backers are probably pretty geeked to know that it's on its
Yeah.
way as well. So
Yes, yes.
excellent. All right. Well, there was another thing I wanted to ask about. We always talk about the things, not just that you're working on and how you
Yeah.
do it and what your craft is like, but we talk about the stuff that inspires you as well. So tell me about Fire Emblem.
Oh, yeah. So I have been obsessed. So this game called Fire Emblem Three Houses, and Fire Emblem has a long history of they made tons of games. It's a tactical warfare plus our role-playing game,
Yeah.
and I just about 2 weeks ago now, I started playing this game because I had a bunch of friends who were like, "Celeste, I think you would really like this. Celeste, you would really like this game." I was like, "Oh, okay, okay." So I finally started playing it, and I've already put in, like, 50 hours on this game, and I can't stop playing it. It's so good. And what I love about it is, like, just mechanics heaven. As a game designer, every turn, I'm like, "Wow, this cool little subsystem inside this game," or "This cool little thing, like, this is amazing." They have, like, a tea party dialogue interaction game
Hmm.
versus, like, the full-scale tactical combat where you're scrolling on a map and moving your units, and all of that rolled into a game with like crafting mechanics and all these cool leveling mechanics. And I just at every turn, I'm just delighted by what is happening.
So I'm going to screech the brakes and say Tea Party
Yeah.
Tact.
So you can have a tea party with somebody, at your university or whatever to
Uh-huh.
gain like social points, and you have to pick conversation topics
Oh
that
my
they
gosh, that's
like to
awesome.
increase and get a better rating. So it's subsystems at every turn. So the people who made this game and I would very, very much get along. Just stuff this total nerdy like exchange of, well, how can we do this? Or like, what if we can build in this? Or how can we make this more complicated? That
Yeah.
uh oh my gosh, it's just such a delight. It's
So one
such
of
a
the things that
delight.
I'm always doing is because I mostly play tabletop games. I
Mhm.
play way too many video games too, but tabletop games are my big love. I always am looking at going like, how can I do that at my table? How can I bring
Yes.
that to my table, right? I mean, I'm
Yes.
sure that
Yeah.
whole tea party piece, you thought through that, like, how do
Ah,
I bring
man.
that about?
I have been I have been trying in wrapping my head and working a little bit about how to make the social role-playing pillar of D&D work in a way that works for everyone. Because you shouldn't have to just be a brilliant improvisational wizard to be
Right,
able to make
yeah,
those work. So I love seeing game systems like this. It's like, how can we gamify this in a way that works at a table with other humans? So that kind of stuff is just so exciting. And then things like I've been really into, like, roguelites
mhm.
lately,
Oh,
and
yeah,
I love playing those and realizing, like, oh, it is so satisfying to be able to switch powers or be able to use all these different kinds of items and come up with these little combos. So how can we do that, right? How can we get that feeling
yeah.
into D&D? So I just playing video games is such a great way, to really challenge yourself to push design in a new and interesting way.
It's cool thinking about gamifying elements that are not natural to
Right.
everyone, but they want in their story. Like,
Yes.
we have some
Yeah.
stuff like that, like goodwill, where you can generate goodwill by doing
Yeah.
things for people, or a resolve system where over time you don't die, you just can't take it anymore, right?
Right.
Because as your companions are killed, as you witness horrible
Yeah.
things, your resolve drops, and finally you're just like, guys, I'm just done.
Yeah.
And you have
Yeah.
characters walk off, but that's a hard story for some people to tell. And it's cool to think about ways to sort of bring that into the game. Are there other things
Yeah.
that you've done that have worked well for you to bring those sort of elements in?
Yeah, so something I was working on a lot, treasure has been a big thing also in, like, thinking
Mhm.
about economy, because there really isn't a lot of 5e support currently for economy, and
Yeah.
so trying to figure, like, how to do this in a way where we're not, like, micromanaging, gold pieces and stuff like that.
Right.
So, I did get to design something very cool for, Tome of Heroes, which is another
Mhm.
Cobalt Press product coming out soon. It was like, sort of an improvement on, like, downtime in a way,
Mhm.
so it was accumulating, wealth points, and you could use
Yeah.
wealth points to spend them on, small things or big things. So whether it's, a 1 wealth point might buy you a week stay at a really fancy inn for you and your 4 best friends and a bunch of food. And so having those points kind of represent that at a larger scale
Right.
seems to work really well because it takes away all the micromanaging math, and it's easy to understand, like, oh, a point is like a great paycheck, right, for the week. That
Yeah.
feeling when you get a great paycheck and it's payday,
Right.
like, bringing that feeling into the game. So, simplifying things, yeah, like wealth, and like I mentioned, yeah, the social aspect, like, how do we do that? Things like, how do you run intrigue? Like, I know a lot
Mhm.
of people want to run these great, like, courtly intrigue games, right? Or have
Yeah.
a ball and, like, you have to, get these people on your team or what. How do you do that in D&D? So that's something I've focused on. The heroic destiny system was actually a result of that same kind of thinking, like, how can we give GMs and players a way to build more personalized stories, at the
Right.
table? So those are just, yeah, some of the things. I'm sure even more, would come to mind, but I
Yeah.
love looking at design in terms of what do people need and what is missing, and then
Yeah.
design to fill in those gaps.
And it's interesting because you sound like you've got a good handle on this idea that there's what's happening in front of the screen, and that's sort of the story. There's got to be this color and richness for all the players,
Right.
but the mechanics underneath need to support that, right? If
Yeah.
they're people sometimes just sort of hand wave the mechanics and go, oh yeah, they kind of work like this, and then all of a sudden you're focused on that instead of the story. It's like
Um,
finding that balance between enough mechanics to support it and drive it forward, but not so many that it becomes about playing the mechanics.
yeah, and people love to, and I believe this as well, story should trump rules, like, absolutely, that is
Mhm.
totally true, but I feel like sometimes that means people want to, like, "No, rules are bad. All rules are bad, and this doesn't work, and, like, let's ignore the rules." That works for people who, again, are brilliant, brilliant improvisers, like, on the fly, amazing
Mhm.
storytellers. They don't need the rules. But the majority of people need something. They need permission
Yeah.
to do things. They need a path to start doing things. And that's what mechanics provide, a way for the majority of folks to take all of this stuff, and it gives them a tool and a focus to be able to channel their creative power, right? So mechanics and rules are desperately important to making things more accessible.
And it's because that's something that when you play with new players, you hear a lot is, well, can I do this? Can I do that? And,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
well, you can do anything. It's a role playing game.
Right, but then
But
people are like,
having a mechanic that they see there, they
yes.
can go,
Yeah.
oh, I can do
Yeah,
this.
and
This
this is how
allows
I
me,
do
right?
it. Yes,
Yeah.
and that's the great starting point because 'cause they'll see that, and once they engage with the rule systems and they have that support, then they have a platform to stand on, and they can leap off in a direction that makes sense, but until then, people are just treading water in the great ocean of possibility, with
Right.
no nothing to grab onto. So those mechanics are those rafts, those bases that you need to build, for further on.
So one of the challenges that I run into is that if you've gamed long enough,
Mm.
it starts to become difficult to see the world through the eyes of someone who's only played for a month,
Yes.
5 years even, right? When you've played for more than a decade, you see things in a different way. How do you sort of put yourself back into that mindset when you're writing?
Yeah, so something I'm really passionate about doing is making sure that I play with new people regularly,
Mhm.
because it keeps me grounded, I think, in a lot of ways. It's really easy when you do have, this you if you are one of the blessed few that have a gaming group that has been together through decades, right? And you have these same people and you know that you can count all these people showing up. It becomes really easy to get busy and just let that be your whole world. Uh,
Mhm.
but when you are doing game design or you have to play with new people. You have to engage with the new people who are coming to the table. And right now D&D is experiencing a tremendous cultural boom,
Yeah.
right? And we are seeing people playing the game and interested in the game who have never been part of the conversation before. And we have to change the conversation to accommodate and to support all of these new players. So it's
Yeah.
important to every once in a while, sign up for a GM slot at a virtual convention or at
Mhm.
every once in a while go to your friendly local game store and be like, "Hey, I can GM. Like, do you need somebody to run an AL table tonight?" Or,
Yeah.
"Hey, maybe jump into a one-shot charity stream every once in a while. If you have any clout in the space or if you just have a webcam." Usually folks are just stoked to find people. There's tons of great charity events and work going on right now. There are great tools online where you can GM for strangers and get money for it. Like Start
Right.
Playing is a great site for doing that. It's important every once in a while to step outside your comfort zone, play with new people, so you can understand also how to teach people to play the game,
Mhm.
uh, and then also how people think about it. Because chances are the new people coming to the table have a very different perspective on what's going on, and that perspective will make you a better GM and a better designer engaging with that.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that is always amazing and for me is when I get to play with people who haven't played very much,
Yeah.
not just different people, but people who are literally new to it because
Yeah.
it's like you get so used to the way that you always play that they're all of a sudden doing stuff. You're like going, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
that's exactly what someone should do. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's a great idea,
Or
right?
you're like, "Wow, I never heard of that rule."
Yeah,
I
exactly.
had that happen when somebody said the spell variant system, the spell slot variant system, and I was like, "What? What is that?" And yep, there it is in the GM, like the DMG, talking about how to use points instead of slots. I'm like, "This is amazing." There are
Right.
always those little things that slip through the sieve, and it's great to be able to rediscover those.
That's really cool. So we still have a decent amount of time, but one of the things that we like to do, and I want to make sure in the past I've had to kind of rush this, so that's why I'm doing
Mm.
this a little bit early, is I like to take our opportunity here with folks watching to put a spotlight on people that we think are like super cool that other people absolutely need to like pay attention to. And you have someone that you wanted to talk about that you were going to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah, so I wanted to highlight my good friend, Jen Vaughn, who is just a creative powerhouse, in the space. So Jen not only is a D&D designer, she's also designed for Pathfinder. She does comic book art. So she just had a new graphic novel come out. She did all the work for, oh yes, her horse. She also teaches like drawing classes to kids specifically, she has like a horse seminar, a
Oh,
horse
that's
girl seminar.
awesome.
That's amazing. So yeah, she's just incredible in the space. She runs a Fiasco Fridays game. It's a once a month on the Roll20 channel.
Mhm.
So playing awesome games. And she's just a great voice for positive change and artist rights in the space. And so definitely recommend checking her out. She's incredible. So at the Genya on Twitter, and you can find
Mhm.
all of her work at Haunted Vault Studios.com. So yeah, and check out her new graphic novel Took. It's about ghosts that possess dolls, and it's very good.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Such a delight.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Yeah, definitely check her out because I looked at some of the stuff and it's super
Oh my
cool.
gosh,
So,
and she's on a
and
podcast, D20 Dames, which is a family-friendly actual play podcast. Venture Maidens, my show, is not family-friendly, so we
got
love
it.
sending people to D20 Dames, so actual D&D you can listen to with kids in your car. So
Right. Oh, that's awesome. And she does gaming material
yes,
too, right? I mean, she's
yes.
doing her own gaming stuff. So,
Yeah,
all very cool.
yeah.
Um, so speaking of games, you talked about something that I don't know how I haven't heard about this because I try to like play everything. But you were talking about escape room games where like you get like a box and it's got
Yes.
game stuff in it. I don't know what
Yes,
it
so
is.
oh my god, you have to do yourself a favor, and this is something that it's been definitely a growing trend, I think, in the past year. More companies have been coming out with these, but yeah, they are escape room style board
Hmm.
games that you can purchase and bring home with you. So what they are, boxes that say on the cover like, "Hey, this is you're only going to be able to play this once. It'll take about 60 minutes or whatever."
Hmm.
And yeah, so inside that box is everything you need to replicate that experience, right? Of having to solve a bunch of puzzles to accomplish a mission or get out of the place. So I've been obsessed with these, obviously, since also a lot of escape rooms have been closed for the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Love
right.
escape rooms, though, obsessed with True Dungeon. Every escape room I can get, I'm like, yes, sign me up. My friends are always like, oh no, another one.
Wait. Do you have like the folder filled with tokens for True Dungeon? Are you one
I
of those
don't.
people?
I'm not that good. I only found True Dungeon and like started getting involved in it right before the pandemic hit. So then I was like, no,
Hmm.
I had to taste.
Oh
And
my God. Yeah.
so, but I'm very much looking forward to doing another one at Gen Con. I'm like, yeah, yeah, booked it
Awesome.
already. So True Dungeon, great, but I've been chasing that experience. So there are companies, the ones that I have a lot of are it's the Exit Escape
Hmm.
Room Company. So that's by Thames and Cosmos, I think, are the people who make it. And these are actually showing up in like normal game stores or bookstores even. So they're these little boxes, they say exit on them. And yeah, so you sit down, they usually have like an app that you load, and with the app it'll have a timer and some cool music. So all of you sitting around with your friends, you start the app and you have that same 60 minutes to solve whatever this scenario is, and you
Yeah.
use the cards and the notes in the box, sometimes the box itself you destroy it in the process to solve these puzzles and clues. So looking at images, or maybe there's engagement with the app. I was playing a Star Wars one the other day where you actually had to like move the phone around and you could see
Oh,
things in like
wow.
ultraviolet. You could read the stuff on the box. It's so creative and an amazing example of how you can take something that feels so impossible to do at home at a table and make it doable
Yeah,
in that
right.
way. Yeah,
And this
another one, oh
Exit
my god.
game was one of them? Is this what you're
Yeah,
talking
so
about
this is
here?
yeah, this so this is the
Okay.
Exit series. So I love doing these. Also, these are super fun, like date night things.
Uh-huh.
If you're ever, sit down with your partner, like 60 minutes doing one of these, super fun. Another one that I really like is Puzzling Pursuits. So I
Mhm.
just played one of theirs for the first time, and it was called Black Brim, 1876. This one, and this was more of a if you've ever seen those, like, How to Catch a Killer boxes
Yeah.
sometimes
Oh,
that
yeah,
they
yeah.
have, or yeah, so a game where it was full of, like, newspaper handouts and old photos and things like that that you had to use to solve and, like, confront this person, right? Solve this crime. So that's another great one, and just I absolutely love this. Anything with handouts, love it. Big fan of handouts. So yeah, it just totally scratches all of that itch. And I'm somebody who loves puzzles in my D&D as well. So like one of
Uh-huh.
my best-selling supplements on the DM's Guild, it's called Puzzle Master, and it's just 10 puzzles to drop into games. Um, that kind of stuff. So these games are just so much fun. So basically all my game nights that I've been getting to play in the last couple of years have been we get one of these games, and that is the evening.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to try that out. I think that we would
You
love that,
have to.
especially for
It's
like one of
so
those
fun.
nights where, you don't wanna play the campaign because you don't wanna go on
Right.
without somebody, but you still wanna play
Yes.
something, right?
Yes, yes, these are perfect for that.
Now, do you have to do a lot of
Especially
prep, or is it just figured out as you
nope.
go?
No prep, nothing.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
usually some companies they're leveling out what is the right amount of instruction, but usually
Right,
there's like a quick, like 5-minute video on the app that tells you everything you need to know. And they're really good about including instructions, and all of them have some kind of hint thing. So either additional like hints you can unlock, or, sealed envelopes you can break open for the answer, that kind of stuff.
right.
So they're really good about giving you everything you need to do these, and yeah, no prep. So which is great because sometimes your poor DM just wants to find out.
Right,
So
just need a break.
you just need a break. So these are great fun alternative, especially if you have puzzle minded players or people who just love puzzle dungeons.
Alright, well, you don't have to reveal any secrets, but, like, how are you what things are inspiring you as far as bringing stuff like this into, like, an RPG? Like, you've gotta be thinking about this, like,
Oh yeah,
how do I,
oh
like,
yeah.
translate this to role-playing
Oh,
games?
I have absolutely used escape room puzzles and turned them into puzzles, especially things like, I love looking at the different types of puzzles, because usually
Mhm.
when I say, "Oh, puzzles," people go, oh god, I hate puzzles, like, ugh, my brain doesn't work like that," and immediately what they are thinking of are those obnoxious situations where you have to answer 3 riddles to get into something. Like, that is absolutely what
Yeah.
everybody is thinking of, and that's not what, all puzzles are. There are so many
Mhm.
different ways to tactily engage, or to engage the other senses, and not just like a right or wrong answer kind of puzzle.
Right.
So I love puzzles that can effectively engage multiple people at once. Those are the ones that are really great. So if you have to have a player doing this over here in
Mhm.
order for another player over here to be doing this thing, or there
Yeah.
are different pieces or different elements that multiple people can be working on at the same time, those are usually the ones that are most successful, I feel like, in gaming situations. So whenever a puzzle can engage a different part of the brain, or present some kind of challenge that's beyond your standard, "Answer me this, if there are 25 manticores and 3 goblins," that kind of like, oh my god. Um, so that kind of stuff. Anything tactile, I'm really, really into.
Well, and the thing is that when it's I what you're talking about is making sure that it doesn't come down to those 2 people at the end of the
Right.
table who are really into it, and
And
that
everybody else is
they're
like
just waiting around just going like, "Okay,"
like, "I
like,
guess I'll get more
let me know when you finish the
wine." Yeah.
puzzle," right?
Yeah, right.
You know?
Go look at Twitter.
Exactly. Right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we are just about out of time, so this is the perfect time to wrap things up. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. It was awesome
Yeah,
to
thanks for
talk to
having
you.
me. Yeah, and
And
thank you all in the chat for hanging out. Thanks so much.
awesome. And hopefully we'll get to see you at Gen Con, and we will talk to you later.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I'll be there.
All right. Bye bye. All right, everyone. That is it for tonight. We have finished another show, had another great conversation. Join us next week. We're going to have Jim Zub here, who, if you don't know who he is, he's an extraordinary talent in the comic biz. He's worked on everything from Conan to Marvel's Thunderbolts to Dungeons and Dragons, not to mention a ton of amazing titles of his own, like Wayward, which I love. And so he'll be joining us next week. So join us next week for that. In the meantime, keep gaming, and thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.